future of the town, in terms of the finances and you know, getting people involved in the process. So the big overarching goal is to create a long range and short term strategy for the town that's highly engaging in terms of outreach with the community, and it becomes a policy guide for towns and for boards and committees in order to help Carlisle improve as a sustainable community. And it's sort of like a high level goal, vision that everyone seems to be buying into in terms of what the planning should do. The purpose of the master plan is, there are several big, the process is just as important as the content of the actual master plan, because it allows us to talk across committees, across issues, to bring all the pieces of the puzzle together on the table, and for all of us to collectively work towards a shared vision and a roadmap that actually will have metrics and targets that will allow us to measure our success. And it needs to be an integrated approach, which I mentioned. So all the sort of consensus building, and it's also comprehensive, both in terms of the short term and the long term. And just to reiterate, it becomes a tool for the boards and committees to all kind of come back to as one shared overarching set of goals and priorities. And it will support financial decisions, regulatory decisions about investments, and ongoing expenditures over multiple years for the various committees and boards. And as I mentioned, it becomes a citizens forum to really get the issues on the table and have town-wide discussions. So we've set up 2 committees. One is a Master Plan Steering Committee, which is 7 members. I'm the chair of that. And we do all the work. We're developing the work plan, the RFP. We will coordinate the hiring of a master plan consultant. We will, and then we will guide the process and support the consultant and link the consultant with all the various boards and committees and the community. We also have an advisory committee, which is quite large, but that's because there was an incredible amount of interest, and we felt it was important to have a good diverse group. So we have folks that range in age from 15 or 14 years old to 85 years old, and we have a nice cross-section of gender representation as well. So, and geographical representation across town. And a lot of different views and a lot of different interests. And that committee is really just there to help us to represent their own voices, but also think about the community from their perspective and from their sort of network perspective. And they won't have any homework or any work to do, except that they actually, some of them really want to do some work. So we've developed 2 info sessions that we'll be having between now and July, that will talk about facts and information about certain topics that are of interest, and those will be published soon. So just very quickly, there are 4 guiding principles that the committee has developed that need to define and guide the process for the master planning. One is that whatever we do, it has to be action-oriented. We do not want a report that sits gathering dust on a shelf somewhere that isn't a part of the daily life, a kind of living document. that supports decision-making in town. It's got to be incredibly community engaging and and transparent, and everyone is invited to the table, and that's an important pillar. It has to be measurable. It should be a performance-based approach, not just a sort of touchy-feely thing, but something that we can actually understand what our progress is and measure it. And then finally, it needs to be integrated. And we are required by state law to include a whole bunch of things. The 81D law requires us to have goals and policies, land use, housing, economic development, natural and cultural resources, open space and recreation, services and facilities, circulation and transportation, and implementation. But it was written in the 70s, so they didn't even talk about sustainability or anything to do with any kind of modern day technology or those kinds of things. So our point is we have to really integrate, but we want to also integrate things that are relevant and will be part of our lives moving forward. We held a community sort of ideas session back in June last year, which I think maybe some of you came to. And in that couple hours, there 10 recurring themes emerged, ranging from, thinking about agriculture, conservation, a community center, and more broadly, creating community. Housing is a hot topic. Figuring out how to start to be more proactive around creating revenue-generating opportunities. Sustainability, focus on the town center. Transportation is a big critical issue and kind of connected to walkability. And there's a ton more information about this on the website and more descriptions. So then what we've done, our task at hand was to come up with a budget and a kind of a process and sort of lay out in broad terms what the process should be in order to give the master plan consultant guidance when they're developing their proposals. I am a master planner I do master planning for a living, so part of our strategy was for me just to take a crack at mocking it up. This will not be, it's all online, so if they want to find it, they can find it, but this won't be part of the RFP, but it was a way for us to get some sort of rigor to the process. So it's the master plan consultant scope is a 4-phase process. This chart includes both our phase 0, our pre-planning phase, which is all being done by the master plan steering committee, and an ongoing phase, which is the responsibility of the town and the committees to actually implement the elements of the master plan. And at the bottom are a bunch of the meeting recommendations. So this process that was laid out, then each of those tasks was sort of defined, and a fee. I developed a fee table based on sort of my understanding of what rates would be for different the different staff members from different fields that would be required. So that estimate came out at about $116,000 plus probably expenses have to be in there. So $122,700 was kind of it was a lean and mean, but still a pretty good process. So that was one method, $122,700. The other was we looked at 5 towns around us, and we got the cost of hiring consultants. We got a sense of what kind of staff town staff were assigned to the master planning process and what their level of involvement was, and we did a kind of a mapping of trying to quantify that time. Some of these plans, Bedford, for example, They only used about 40,000 for a consultant, but they have 5 different staff members, including a planning director, assistant planner, a GIS analyst, a lot of staff time. So the long and the short is that the range is a lot, but it's all, nobody's getting below 140,000 or so. So that all that info's in if you want to take a closer look at it. So we were recommending a budget of 135,000. It was agreed, and the discussions we had with the Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board was that, okay, but what if we have to come back for more because something, something unexpected happens? All of these cases in almost all of them, there was something that happened along the way that caused an increase in the budget or a change in the budget. And we just want to be prepared and anticipate that. So the point was that we're going to go to town meeting. I believe it's for 150,000. I'm not 100% sure whether it's 150 or 160 because there's $10,000 floating around somewhere, and I'm not sure whether it's in there. So don't quote me on that, but it's somewhere in that range. Again, feedback from comparable towns. Some of the outcomes, and this is just a first crack because it's, we've been really trying to, be as rigorous as we can in selling the necessity of a master planning process. And there are so many positive things that come out of a master planning process that will help save money elsewhere. For example, the GIS system will be updated during a master planning process. Both the open space and recreation and the housing production plans are all things we have to do as a town by law, I think, in 2020. So the master plan will actually tee up those in a way that's all integrated. So this is just to say that there are a lot of things that happen through a master planning process that go well beyond just the actual plan itself. And this is the website, carlisleplan.org, and I'm not sure whether it's linked to the town website yet. There was some bugaboo about that, so there's lots of information. Tanya White does a pretty good job of keeping it up to date, so you can see what's going on. So that's more or less kind of an overview of what we've got going. Any questions or?
How does the plan decide? Is it more the committee? Is it the entire town? Are things that we voted on? Is it surveyed? It depends who goes to the meetings.
All of the above. So let me just. It's a little hard to see, but those big pink boxes at the bottom. So this is the sort of suggested scope of work for the master plan process after the consultant's hired. And I'll speak to what we're doing before that in a minute. The 4 pink boxes represent community-wide meetings. Where everyone's invited, and a big part of the consultant's role will be to figure out how to get as many people from as many different corners and with as many different opinions to the table involved in the master planning process. So that might involve surveys, that is likely to involve some kind of focus groups. There will be website, information and blasts or whatever we call them, and a communication plan to try to get as many people as we can involved. we had 120 people come to our ideas work session in June, just by, through our crummy little pamphlets put up at Ferns and trying to reach out to the network. So I think there's a lot of interest of people that don't normally come to meetings and participate. And the consultant will have to show that they have interest in and ability to create a really rich and holistic community process.
I think it's, so, and you do this, so you know. So I assume a lot of people have their various interests that they want to promote and have the town focus on, whether it's affordable housing, or recreation space, or green energy, etc.
Right.
Most of which all cost money. And so if we say, oh, everybody wants to do this, we're trying to incorporate other, how does it turn out that you get a plan that can be implemented and there's a monetary budget influence that, there's actually going to be some losers, or people, really, there should be, well, this isn't really a priority.
Right.
The town has decided this thing that you want isn't a priority unless you can come up with money for it or something.
Yeah, so the process includes, like the first part of the process, that phase one is really about fact finding and gathering information. And this is a fact driven, data driven, but fact, reality based, information based process. So we're not going to just sit around the table and speculate about world populations and whatever. We're going to look at the facts and really have the information available to start making real choices. The second phase is an iterative kind of, okay, if we do this, this, and this is how they go together. These are the financial, I would personally really love it if we could have a kind of an evaluation criteria that included financial criteria, emissions criteria, some kind of social metric, like some towns are measuring happiness, right? So like it's a bit hard to measure that, but they are. So that second part of the process is saying, if these are our aspirations, these are the facts, this is the balancing act.
Right.
And we'll look at lots of different options and iterations. And the goal is to create consensus around a plan that everyone can buy into. But everyone, and usually when I do this, you bring most people along. There's always people that aren't going to agree with anything that goes forward. So it's just part of the consensus building process, and there has to be a setting expectations phase to it. Right. So it's not just, oh yeah, we can do this, that, and the other, and everything under the sky. Right. There's a limit to this.
So with this, then you're going to be balancing what necessities and what niceties. I call them niceties because if you look at what has to be done in this town in the short term with just the facilities, with just the police station, with just the fire station, and the growth of the town, and you add those dollars up to get those things accomplished, how much more of this extra dollars we have versus what we're going to put on the taxpayer. And those things need to be balanced big time because the way I see it is there isn't that much left unless you're going to really tax us or find revenues somewhere.
So that's the key.
That's the key.
Is the finding revenue somewhere.
Right.
And
the key is to find revenues that are not on the taxpayer. It has to be from an external source, or you might as well tax it.
Right.
And that's kind of where I'm very concerned with the master plan, because master planning is, in my mind, which when we used to do it, is a living document, and it should be reviewed yearly, because as culture or importance of things happening in the town changes, the master plan should change. It shouldn't be a goal that we set or something that we wanted to do 2 years from now, and then we get to 2 years, we're going to do this. we should be evaluating that to make sure that makes sense to do.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I don't know
And
how that's gonna be
part
appropriate.
Part of the implementation phase of the plan will be for the consultant to help us, work with us to develop an implementation approach, which will probably include some ongoing, master plan committee of some kind that is responsible for updating the plan and deciding whether or not we need external help to do that.
So I would say the flip side of what you're saying is, if you don't have the master plan committed for 5 or 10 years, and it's gonna be, this piece is so comprehensive, there's no way you can say in a year or two, well, that's changed, well, we shouldn't have the master. You either gotta stick with the plan or not,
Well,
you know what I mean?
The plan has several pieces to it, though.
Right.
So one is a sort of overarching vision, which I don't think is gonna have, it's not gonna be that much different from the plan we did in 1961, or the plan we did in 1995, in terms of kind of the ultimate vision for the town, in terms of its rural character, in terms of, you know, how good it, at the school, the field. But the action plans, the implementation parts is, I think is what you're talking about, Bill, is where you're actually looking at what you can and cannot get done, and you're balancing, if opportunity knocks, you have the ability to sort of say, okay, we're not gonna do that, we're gonna do this instead. Or we're gonna do this a lot slower, we're gonna do this a lot faster. And that part of the master plan needs to be an ongoing sort of juggling act.
Well, whatever Bill was saying, like, it has to be balanced with the affordability of the town, what you can afford,
Yeah.
I mean, it's nice to think of all kinds of things, but whether the town can implement that with the future revenue
critical.
goals.
And also too is, and it's one of my pet peeves, is that there's a lot of rolling stones, that, we have a lot of individuals that come into town and they make up a lot of plans and want to spend a lot of money, and then they go in 4 years or 5 years, and the people that are committed to this town for many years end up paying for that stuff that maybe they didn't support, and that's a balance.
Yeah.
Long term versus short term, and if you look around, there's a lot of people from when I moved in here in '87, they're gone, and they did a lot of things that are good for the town, but they did a lot of things that initiatives that we should do, but in the long term things is they're not paying for them. It's that the people, the taxpayers that are staying around for a long time are paying for those initiatives with sometimes very little payback. So that roll into that is, has the committee looked at any grants? Because there's a lot of regulation here that the state requires us to do. Is there any grant money out there, the state, to help us fund this $130,000, $150,000?
So there are a lot of places we can go looking for grant money. One of the possibilities that we looked at is the MAPC, is that what it is? The Metropolitan
District Council,
so Boxborough, for example, actually hired MAPC to do their master plan, and the town contributed $75,000 in MAPC. They applied for a grant from MAPC, but MAPC was hired. So MAPC is a possibility in terms of finding small sort of increments of funding. It's not what we've there's not going to be. We have not found a grant that is applicable to do a full-on master plan. It seems to have a more focus to it, and so there will be elements of this plan. $150,000 is going to get us somewhere, but it's not going to get us. If we want to drill down into something and get something done, we're going to have to apply for grants for ongoing things. So that's not a very straightforward answer, but we did look about a year and a half ago. We did do a sort of a scan of what could be available. And it seemed that most of the grants were focused on a particular area.
Maybe a subcommittee for just for
Yeah.
grants or master plan would help, so that
Yeah.
it's very focused, because there's just a lot of stuff out there, it just has to find it.
Yeah,
You know? Just a lot.
that's a good thought.
So, one thing I just wanted to mention that Jan had told me previously is that once this, in developing this plan, the idea is to get as much community input as possible, obviously. But the actual approval of the plan, once it's together, is not by a town meeting vote, it is by the Board of Selectmen vote, as I understand. So it doesn't, the plan doesn't get finalized and then go to a town meeting, it just gets voted on by the Board of Selectmen, and they have to be convinced that this does in fact represent the consensus of the community, and if Jan and her team and the consultants have done their homework, presumably it will. And they can demonstrate that to the board, but it's not gonna be a separate vote.
Yeah, apparently master plans are not, they're not something the town meeting votes on. Elements of it, when we start asking for money for things, become part of that. But
So really, it's only binding by the dollars at town meeting that appropriates for whatever section that we're working on.
or other parts, I mean, in terms of your goal setting, your thinking, the Energy Task Force thinking around the pathways or whatever you're calling it, is that something that you're hoping to get sort of some kind of vote from town meeting, or?
Well, we've flipped around. At one point, that was discussed in their subcommittee level. And I talked to Wayne Davis, and he sort of talked me out of it, because what I really wanted to do is go to town hall and use it as a platform to have a referendum effectively.
Town meeting.
And at town meetings there. And he said, well, it's probably not the best use of town meeting, and there's various pitfalls to that. So we backed off that. But as some of these folks know, our subcommittee is now reporting back to the full committee, the full task force here. In general, that started to talk about resource requirements around the carbon footprint issue. So the committee the task force hasn't taken any position yet on that. Might be a while before we do about resources, but we Jan came to a subcommittee meeting on the goals subcommittee just to make sure we're working together and what we're trying to do will fit well into the master plan and vice versa. This all makes sense. Are there any other questions for Jan? Because I do want to encourage a vote. We have a quorum here, obviously, as to whether, well, I'll put it out and then just make sure I can.
Usually, most committees that I've been on usually take in information, evaluate it, and then vote on the next meeting on stuff. I mean, I haven't seen the presentations, I haven't seen the webpage. I'd be uncomfortable voting unless.
Okay.
That's
We
just
can
my
do that.
thought. I mean, normally we have some time to digest some of this stuff and look at it in
That's-
detail.
If folks
But if you want a
ready-
general support of the master plan, I'm supporting of it. I'm supporting of it, but I'd like to see what.
That's fine. We need
Yeah.
we could do it in March, and then it'll be before the meeting. So
That's the
Yeah,
time
that's-
frame when you need it. Jim.
That's fine, I mean, we're not expecting any more than a general support for the process. The warrant will get, either voted up or down at town meeting. We're just really wanting to be able to say that in general, all the committees and boards are in support, so.
Jan, I have a question. Does the facilities master plan fall underneath that, to that level? Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
In terms of
it has to.
what
Yeah.
buildings we need, or when
Right.
buildings should be replaced or combined, or
Right.
that sort of
Zero energy or whatever, future plans.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, I think everyone was copied on the email, so everyone has Jan's address now.
Yeah.
I'll just put out the offer on your behalf. If you come up, because we do want to vote on this before the town meeting. It's essentially like we do, well, essentially it's really good if we do that. So if you do have questions for Jan that you
feel
think of
free.
after tonight, please reach out to her. Yes, Glenn.
So so one way the master plan could, kind of addressing sort of, Bill, your question is, could it be about, let's say, zoning, in the sense of unlocking potential, let's say in the center of town, for instance, to make it a more of a, like enlarging the business district and, allowing a high density development, and let's say allowing a developer to come in and connect to our wastewater treatment plant, allowing them to put in a public water supply on the Conant land, let's say, and then servicing, the center with sewer and water, so that you can have, some more retail and a community center maybe, and maybe some, housing, some of which could be affordable, blah, blah, blah. So that it wouldn't necessarily, it might actually add revenue, tax revenue to the town. And the cost to the town could be rather minimal. You could recoup it in building permit fees and, all the permitting fees. You just have to change the zoning and set it up so that everybody's comfortable with what would end up being developed there. And, you could get some value for the community in terms of, a nicer center that has more places to go, things to do for kids as well as adults, seniors, community center, that whole thing. I mean, that to me seems like a way that one could get value for the town without having to spend money up front.
So you're right on the money. The zoning is a major tool that the master plan will help inform what changes should be made. I just personally, I come across public-private partnerships that happen all over the place, and I'm not talking about like highway building and bridge building. I'm talking about just very small-scale engagements between the public sector and the private sector in order to get things done that the public sector can't afford to do on its own, and it benefits the private sector. And so I do think those are things that we don't look at as a town. We sort of just stay in our lane, and we should really be thinking. And don't get me wrong, I'm Canadian and Norwegian. I've got socialist blood coursing through my veins, but there's a lot of things that the private sector can participate in that will help move us along. But those are all things that what you sort of listed a whole bunch of things that could all happen sort of in and around the question of what to do with town center, and touches on almost all of the at least half of the topics, the recurring themes that are coming up. So I think that's absolutely probably going to be a big part of it.
Municipal solar is an example. What we're trying to do with that.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
It's a win-win for both parties.
Right.
If we get it done.
Okay, sounds like we're sort of tapped out on questions, but final check?
Yeah,
Good?
that's good.
Great, thanks so much for
Thank
coming
you.
in,
Thank you, Jan.
Yeah,
Super.
and
You're,
as Bob
of course,
says,
welcome
just
to stay, or you can...
it's okay, I gotta go get dinner.
Oh, my goodness.
Thank you so much. Okay, I handed out a couple copies, but these are the minutes from the last meeting. If anyone needs a copy, and what this is it's the minutes that Debbie sent out quite a while ago, but they include some markups that I made, so that's why you'll see some edits done to it. Let me know if you agree with the changes or have any other suggestions.
question on 5.2.
Oh, thank you, yeah. Does anyone remember what that action item was? Because it's not worded sensibly, I don't know what it is.
Tim Garrett has set up a solar, set up a working group, proceed with negotiations with Amoresco. That's a good way to word it.
Okay, so that's thank you. Any other edits? Bill, you good?
I'm good.
That's it? Okay, I'm sorry. I should know all this. I can't make the motion.
Correct.
I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes for the January 2 meeting as amended.
So moved. Second.
A second? Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes?
Yeah.
Aye. So I guess, so that's okay, we've got a quorum, we've got,
Can I approve minutes
Revotes?
when I wasn't there?
but, you don't have to. I think it's, I'm just
Yeah, there you
verifying
go.
with people it's okay to take a vote. We have 3 votes, 1 abstention or whatever. It's fine, okay, it works.
Only 4 of us there, too.
Great. So I did want to make a couple comments about meeting management. First of all, January 2nd meeting, for those who were here, will remember that it was a very long meeting. So first of all, I wanted to apologize to people. We had a lot on the agenda, and but I did not check in with people when I realized it was going way over, and I should have. So I'll try to do better, but I did want to bring up a couple of points. First, I want to remind everybody that don't hesitate to interject if you have a suggestion on how I'm managing any meeting, including like moving along, Bob, or whatever, you know. Helen eventually did that, but I think she was ready to drop on the floor before she did. So just keep that in mind. 2, I always try to send out a draft of the agenda, so that's your opportunity to review what we're going to talk about, and if it's not what you think we should be talking about, if you think it's too much or too little, that's also helpful to let me know. 3, just out of respect for everybody on the task force, it would be great if we can arrive on time and start on time, which means, you know, coming into the building before 7 p.m. to get in the room and be ready to go. And the other thing that I would encourage, and this is up to you, I mean, it's just a suggestion I have to help things along since our meeting time is so precious, that that we all review the minutes, the draft minutes in advance of the meeting, and suggest any edits to our secretary, Debbie, who can do what we have right here, change his version, and then, you know, it's not like we have to read them for the first time during the meeting and just make it go faster. That's up to the task force, but it's just a suggestion I'd like to make. the more we can do on that, then hopefully the approval of the minutes is like a 3-minute job. So that's all I have to say about that, unless there's any questions. Make sense? Carlisle annual
Can
report.
I ask a question? Just
Sure.
Who's on the committee? 4 of us, Helen, Debbie, and Stan still?
Dan's still on the committee.
Yeah, that's okay.
7 months.
You know, the reality is that Dan doesn't affect our ability to get a quorum. In other words, he doesn't change the number.
Right.
We still need 4 people to get a quorum, even if he wasn't on the committee.
Right.
But yeah, that's the committee.
Jonathan, you like your position?
I am on enough things right now.
Well, you know, having non-member participation is not a bad thing. It's really, actually, really good. And I think,
Yeah.
God, what Claude and Jonathan have done as non-members has been phenomenal.
No, Dan's plan, is he going to come or?
I don't know. He's been very busy, and anyone's welcome to talk to him and encourage him, but you
So
know.
maybe he should not, he should resign, you know?
Well, maybe he should, but
Because
the point,
because
I haven't pressed it with him
Quorum
because,
basis, you know, because, you know.
but it's not right,
People.
frankly, right now. It's
Unless
not
there was
hurting
somebody
us.
else to replace him.
Replace
Right,
us,
it
yeah.
doesn't.
Yeah.
Right,
It
right.
hasn't hurt us because we still need 4
4 people, okay.
Right.
for a quorum, so it's not really hurting us. Okay. So the annual report, last year, I think Claude had written up something for the Carlisle annual report on the Energy Task Force. And I sent around a note on this too. I haven't gotten any volunteers. It's due on February 28th. I'm not planning to write it myself, but I think it's actually a reasonable thing to do. It's probably a good thing for us to do. But I'm just putting it out one more time to see if there's a volunteer who'd be willing to do it. Okay. Okay. Fair enough. We'll move on. Won't worry about that for this year. Update on green communities projects. Always seems Bill, you're the one who seems to have all the status.
Let's see, school's completely done, except for the HVAC portion of that second project, a small project that's, say 75% done, because I'm gonna say 25% is the software. There are some things that this changing in the software to operate the unit as on-demand ventilation instead of 100% ventilation. We wanted a set point on the software, and we wanted a readout of what the CO2 was, and it should be changeable by the facility manager, so that they can revert back to the existing, and that hasn't been done yet. So that's kind of what's hanging on that project. That's the $7,500 project. All the lighting on the
DPW is done.
DPW is done. The school is completely done.
DPW did outdoor lighting or indoor?
Indoor. All the interior of the barn and the offices and the mechanics area. It's all new LEDs. You go down there, nice and bright.
The barn?
Where they park all the trucks inside.
Oh, okay.
The old horse barn, I call it. That's done. What else? A couple of things that are remaining. Claude can give an update on the the charging station. The 2 projects that are kind of pending right now is both from Guardian. We're waiting on them to start this building. They were looking for a form, and I talked with Tim last week, and Tim's supposed to get them the form so they can start this. We have a contract with them, they just haven't gotten around to it. And then the D-Strat fans in the school, I've asked Guardian to look at it to see if they could do it, if we can move some funds around from the police station grant that we got. And they said they were willing to, and they wanted to do it, and they're supposed to set up a date, but they haven't set up a date to go and look at the gym.
So that's the gym where the D-strap
Yeah,
will be.
yeah, because the high ceilings there.
Yeah.
So that's kind of pending, and this building is kind of still up in the air, even though we have a signed contract, it's supposed to start sometime.
The brick building, there was talk of putting heat pumps in there.
We didn't get a grant for that. We didn't get the grant for that. Yeah. So that's kind of the update.
So-
I have just one question before we go to the charging stations. Has anyone spoken to Neil Duffy about just initially about moving the funds?
No, I haven't anyway. What the intent would be is to get Guardian to come back with a firm fixed price, and then say, hey Neil, there's some money here that we'd like to move, because it's about, I mean, if you take the money that Claude freed up from the police station, I should say.
Anti-idle.
Yeah, anti-idling project. You add that to what we have in the D-Strat fan grants, it's just about very close to what Guardian's original, cost was, so.
Do you think it'd be a good idea, even though we don't have all the details yet, to just get the concept in front of them?
Sure.
That we're
Yeah,
looking at, right?
usually, yeah. Because let them know that we're not gonna spend the funding in the charging, the anti-idling project, so.
I
You'd be
mean-
willing to talk, I'm gonna be gone for a couple of weeks, so.
If you want me to, sure.
Just let them know that that's what we're looking at, we're waiting on the contractor to get back to us with a firm fixed price. And if that is doable from their standpoint.
Yeah. I'll just tee up the concept. I know Bill, you know pretty well, much better than I, but from what I know of him, he seems to be a real
Yep.
reasonable guy.
Yep, he is.
I think I'll try to accommodate if we can, but there may be reasons why they didn't fully fund this in the first place.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. So I'll get that teed up with him, even though we don't have all the information yet.
Great.
Okay, Claude?
Yes, EV charging station, unfortunately I can't report any progress really. I've visited Matt, spoken to him with a number of times, pretty much like on a weekly basis.
I'm sorry, with who?
Matt Herwick, who's the proprietor of
Oh,
Furnace.
right.
And so I'd given him a printout of this application form, EV Make Ready application, which is kind of what you need to get the process started. So, and he said, oh yeah, I gave it to Barbara, the owner of who has the title to the property. Whether she's arguably the owner, there's like a life estate sort of arrangement, but technically she's the owner, so she has to sign on it. And it was like, oh yeah, her son is looking at it, and I'm going to meet with him, and da 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 da. And then finally he said, oh, they lost the form. So I emailed him, in a PDF copy, and I haven't heard back from him. I actually texted him today, and I didn't get a response. I texted him before noon, and he said he would text me the minute he got it, so I haven't gotten a text from him. So it's kind of just sitting there, and it never seems to quite kind of get past that point. Debbie Bentley did create an application for the Historical Commission, which you may have seen.
Yes.
Showing what the whole charging station thing would look like, so that the Historical Commission can kind of say yes or no. But it's hard to imagine they would say no, because in Concord, in the middle of their historic district, they have actually 3 now charging stations that are very prominent. They're visible from Main Street as you drive by, and the others are in sort of parking lots behind, which I guess are more akin to what we're talking about. But
Does Stearns have to go to site plan review because it changed?
no, okay, so they got a reading from John, our building inspector.
Yeah.
Right? And he said no, it's not a change of use, so it doesn't trigger site plan review. So it's just the Historical Commission.
Okay.
And perhaps, pulling an electrical permit or that kind of thing. So I guess progress has been made in that front, but in terms of getting the application filled out, signed by the owner of the property, that's like stuck. And I don't really know how to get,
Face-to-face visit.